This entitled woman walked into a courtroom thinking she could disrespect one of the most powerful judges on television. And what happened next became one of the most viral moments in courtroom history. But here's the thing nobody saw coming. Judge Judy wasn't always the intimidating force we know today. She came from humble beginnings, faced mockery for her accent her entire career in this moment. This was personal. When this arrogant defendant decided to mock Judge Judy's Brooklyn accent right to her face, laughing like she was untouchable, she had no idea she just awakened something dangerous. What Judge Judy did in response didn't just silence the courtroom. It left this woman completely destroyed. And the clip has been watched over 50 million times because people can't believe what they witnessed. I'm talking about a verbal takedown so brutal, so perfectly executed, that even the plaintiff stood there with her mouth open. And the best part? Judge Judy did it with such ice-cold composure that you could feel the temperature drop in that courtroom. But before I show you exactly how Judge Judy dismantled this disrespectful woman piece by piece, if you love seeing entitled people get exactly what they deserve, do me a favor, smash that like button right now and hit subscribe. Because I bring you the most satisfying takedowns on the internet, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Alright, let's get into this because what happened here is absolutely insane. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Now, before we dive into what actually went down in that courtroom, you need to understand who Judge Judy really is. Because this isn't just another case of a judge putting someone in their place. This is deeply personal. And when you know her story, you'll understand why this moment hit different. Judith Sheindlin, better known as Judge Judy, didn't start at the top. She grew up in Brooklyn, New York, the daughter of a dentist father and a homemaker mother who taught her that respect isn't given. It's earned through hard work and integrity. Her parents were immigrants, and that thick Brooklyn accent she carries, that's not something she puts on for television. That's her heritage, her roots, her identity, and throughout her entire career, people have underestimated her because of it. They hear that accent and think she's just another New York loudmouth. They have no idea who they're dealing with. Judge Judy spent decades clawing her way up through a legal system that didn't want women, let alone women with strong personalities and working-class accents. She became a prosecutor in the family court system in 1972, and back then the courtroom was a boys' club. Male lawyers would patronize her, judges would dismiss her, and defendants would smirk at her like she was a joke. But she didn't back down. She didn't soften her accent or change who she was to fit in. Instead, she worked twice as hard, won her cases, and earned a reputation as the toughest judge in New York. By 1986, she was appointed as a supervising judge in Manhattan's family court, handling over 20,000 cases. 20,000! And she did it all while people mocked the way she talked. Then came 1996 when she got her own television show. And here's where it gets interesting because a lot of people thought she'd never make it on TV. The executives were nervous about her accent, her blunt style, her refusal to play nice. They thought America wouldn't relate to her. They were wrong. Dead wrong. Judge Judy became the highest-rated show in daytime television, pulling in 10 million viewers a day at its peak. She became the highest-paid person on television, earning $47 million a year, more than any actor, any news anchor, anyone. But even with all that success, even with all those millions of viewers, people still tried to diminish her. They'd mock her accent, call her a caricature, say she was just playing a character for ratings. And every single time she proved them wrong by being authentically herself. But here's what most people don't know. Behind that tough exterior, Judge Judy has dealt with people mocking her background her entire life. In interviews, she's talked about how people would hear her speak and assume she wasn't educated, wasn't sophisticated, wasn't worthy of respect. She's got a law degree. She's presided over thousands of real cases with real consequences. She's written multiple books. She's built an empire, and still people hear that Brooklyn accent and think they can talk down to her. That's the context you need to understand. When someone walks into her courtroom and mocks the way she speaks, they're not just being rude in the moment. They're touching on decades of disrespect, decades of people underestimating her, decades of having to prove herself over and over again. Now let's talk about the defendant in this case. This woman, we'll call her Karen because that's exactly what she was, walked into Judge Judy's courtroom with an attitude that screamed entitlement. She was there for a small claims dispute, something about a personal loan that went bad, and from the moment she entered, you could see it in her body language. She thought this was beneath her. She rolled her eyes during the opening statements. She sighed dramatically when the plaintiff was talking. She kept checking her phone like she had somewhere better to be. This woman genuinely believed that she was going to walk in, say her piece, and walk out victorious, because in her mind, she was smarter than everyone in that room, including Judge Judy. And here's where things started to go sideways. Judge Judy has this ability to read people within seconds. She's seen thousands of liars, cheaters, and con artists stand in front of her bench, and she can spot them immediately. So when this defendant started speaking, giving her side of the story with this condescending tone like she was explaining basic math to a child, Judge Judy's expression changed. You could see it in her eyes, that look that says, I know exactly what you're doing and you're not getting away with it. The defendant didn't notice. She was too busy thinking she was clever, spinning her version of events where she was the victim and the plaintiff was the problem. But then came the moment that changed everything. Judge Judy asked her a direct question about the loan, something simple like, when did you agree to pay this money back? And the defendant, with this smug little smile on her face, responded. But it wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it. She mimicked Judge Judy's accent. She exaggerated the Brooklyn pronunciation, made it sound cartoonish, and then she laughed. Actually laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. The courtroom went silent. Not the normal quiet you get when people are paying attention. This was the kind of silence that happens when everyone collectively realizes something terrible is about to happen. The plaintiff's jaw dropped. The audience members looked at each other with wide eyes. Even the bailiff, who's seen everything, shifted uncomfortably. Judge Judy didn't react immediately. And that's what made it so terrifying. She just stared at this woman. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. The defendant's smile started to fade because she realized that nobody was laughing with her. The silence stretched out so long that you could feel the tension through the screen. This wasn't going to be a regular case anymore. This was personal. Judge Judy had spent her entire life dealing with people who thought they could mock her and get away with it. And this defendant just made the biggest mistake of her life. She thought she was in control. She thought she was being clever and funny. She had no idea that she just stepped on a landmine, and Judge Judy was about to detonate it in the most devastating way possible. What happened next wasn't just a legal judgment. It was a masterclass in how to destroy someone's credibility, their dignity, and their entire case without ever raising your voice. And trust me, you need to hear exactly how this went down. So there they were, standing in that courtroom with the tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Judge Judy sat behind her bench, still staring at this defendant with those piercing eyes that have made grown men confess to things they didn't even do. The defendant, let's call her Karen, was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, she had crossed a line. But she wasn't backing down yet. See, people like Karen have this problem where their ego won't let them admit they're wrong, even when every instinct in their body is screaming at them to apologize. So instead of saying sorry, instead of acknowledging that mocking someone's accent in their own courtroom is incredibly disrespectful, she doubled down. She stood there with her arms crossed, chin up, like she was daring Judge Judy to do something about it. Now, the case itself was pretty straightforward. Karen had borrowed $3,000 from the plaintiff, a former friend, with a promise to pay it back within 6 months. That was 2 years ago. The plaintiff had text messages, a written agreement, even Venmo requests showing that she'd been asking for her money back over and over again. Karen's defense? She claimed the money was a gift. Classic move. When you owe someone money and don't want to pay it back, suddenly that loan becomes a gift. But here's the thing. Karen wasn't even trying to make a convincing argument. She was treating this whole situation like it was a joke, like she was doing everyone a favor by even showing up. Judge Judy had already reviewed the evidence before the case started. She does her homework. She always does. So she knew exactly what the documents said. She knew the text messages proved Karen was lying. And she knew this was going to be an easy ruling. But that's not why people watch Judge Judy. They don't tune in to see her read documents and make logical decisions. They watch because sometimes, just sometimes, someone pushes her too far, and she reminds them why you don't disrespect people who have earned their position through decades of hard work. The courtroom was packed that day. Every seat in the gallery was filled with people who came to watch justice happen, and they were getting way more than they bargained for. You could see them leaning forward in their seats, whispering to each other, pointing at Karen like they couldn't believe what they just witnessed. Some of them had their phones out, probably hoping to catch this moment on camera, knowing it was going to be something special. The plaintiff stood there looking vindicated, like she knew Karen was about to get what was coming to her. She'd been humiliated by this woman for 2 years, been called names, been told she was petty for asking for her own money back, and now she was going to watch her former friend get destroyed on national television. Judge Judy finally broke the silence. She leaned forward, and when she spoke, her voice was calm. Too calm. That's the scariest version of Judge Judy. When she's not yelling, when she's not being dramatic, when she's just cold and calculated. She said, "Excuse me?" Just those 2 words. "Excuse me?" And Karen, still trying to maintain her false confidence, responded with, "What? I was just asking a question." But Judge Judy wasn't buying it. She tilted her head slightly the way a predator does when it's sizing up its prey and said, "No, you weren't asking a question. You were mocking the way I speak. And I want to make sure I heard you correctly, because if you did what I think you just did, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation." That's when Karen's face started to change. The smugness was fading, replaced by something that looked like fear. She realized that she wasn't dealing with some pushover judge who would let things slide. She was dealing with Judge Judy, a woman who had been disrespected her entire career and had developed zero tolerance for it. Karen tried to backtrack, stammering something about how she didn't mean anything by it, how it was just a joke, how Judge Judy was being too sensitive. Wrong move. Calling Judge Judy sensitive is like pouring gasoline on a fire. The audience gasped again. Someone in the back row actually said, "Oh no," loud enough for the microphones to pick up. Judge Judy's expression didn't change. She just kept staring, letting Karen dig herself deeper and deeper into a hole. And that's when you knew it was coming. The takedown. The moment everyone was waiting for. Judge Judy was about to teach this woman a lesson she would never forget. Judge Judy let the silence hang in the air for another moment, and then she spoke. Her voice was ice-cold, measured, deliberate. "Let me tell you something," she began. And everyone in that courtroom knew that when Judge Judy starts a sentence with those words, someone is about to get educated. "I've been practicing law since before you were born. I've presided over more than 20,000 cases in family court. I've written best-selling books. I've built a career that spans 4 decades. And in all that time, I've heard every excuse, every lie, every manipulation tactic that people like you think is original. But you know what I haven't tolerated? Not once, not ever? Disrespect in my courtroom." Karen's face went pale. She opened her mouth to say something, but Judge Judy held up one finger. Just one finger. That's all it took to silence her completely. "I'm not finished," Judge Judy continued. "You walked into this courtroom today thinking you're clever. You thought you could come in here, mock my accent, get a few laughs, and somehow that would distract from the fact that you're a liar and a thief. You borrowed $3,000 from someone who trusted you, someone who considered you a friend. And instead of being an adult and paying it back, you're standing here making excuses and trying to make me the villain, because I speak with a Brooklyn accent." The audience was completely silent now. Nobody moved. Nobody even seemed to be breathing. This wasn't just Judge Judy ruling on a case anymore. This was personal and everyone could feel it. Karen tried to interrupt again, saying something about how that's not what she meant, but Judge Judy wasn't having it. "Don't," she said sharply. "Don't insult my intelligence by pretending you didn't just do what we all heard you do. You mock the way I speak because you think it makes me less than you. You think that accent means I'm not educated, not sophisticated, not worthy of respect. Let me educate you about something. This accent? This is the sound of someone who grew up in Brooklyn, who worked her way through law school, who fought every single day to be taken seriously in a world that didn't want women in positions of power. This accent represents hard work, determination, and success. What does your voice represent? Entitlement, dishonesty, disrespect." Karen's eyes were starting to water now, not from sadness but from humiliation. She could feel every single person in that courtroom staring at her, judging her, realizing what kind of person she really was. The plaintiff had a small smile on her face, the kind of smile that says, "I told you so." She'd warned Karen that going up against Judge Judy was a bad idea, but Karen hadn't listened. She thought she was smarter than everyone else. She wasn't. Judge Judy wasn't done. She leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and her expression shifted from angry to something worse. Disappointed. "You know what the saddest part about this is?" she asked, not really expecting an answer. "You had a chance to come in here, admit you owed the money, work out a payment plan, and leave with some dignity intact. Instead, you chose to be disrespectful, to make this about me instead of about your own failures. And now, not only are you going to lose this case, but millions of people are going to see exactly who you are. They're going to watch you mock someone's heritage, and they're going to watch you get exactly what you deserve." The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Karen tried one more time to defend herself, her voice shaking now. "I really didn't mean it like that, Judge Judy. I swear I wasn't trying to be disrespectful." But it was too late. The damage was done. Judge Judy just shook her head slowly, like a teacher who's given up on a student who refuses to learn. "The problem with people like you," she said quietly, "is that you're only sorry when you get caught. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry that it backfired. There's a difference, and I've been doing this long enough to know which one you are." Karen looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Her arms dropped to her sides. Her shoulders slumped. She finally realized that she wasn't getting out of this. But Judge Judy still wasn't finished with her, not even close. The real destruction was still coming. Now here's where Judge Judy shifted gears completely. She'd already humiliated Karen on a personal level, made it crystal clear that disrespecting her was a mistake. But now it was time to dismantle her legally. And this is where Judge Judy's brilliance really shines, because she doesn't just win cases, she destroys them so thoroughly that there's no room for doubt, no room for appeals, no room for the defendant to walk away thinking they had any chance at all. She picked up the papers in front of her, the evidence that the plaintiff had submitted, and she started going through it piece by piece. And with every single point she made, Karen looked smaller and smaller. "Let's talk about this so-called gift," Judge Judy began, holding up the written agreement between Karen and the plaintiff. "You signed this document. Your signature is right here. It clearly states that you borrowed $3,000 and agreed to pay it back within 6 months. Now, I've seen a lot of things in my career, but I've never seen a gift that requires a signature, a payment plan, and a specific date for repayment. So explain to me and explain to everyone watching how this is a gift and not a loan." Karen stammered, trying to come up with an answer. "Well, she said I could have it, and then later we talked about me paying it back, but it started as a gift." Judge Judy's eyebrows went up. "Oh, so it started as a gift and then magically transformed into a loan? That's fascinating. Do you have any evidence of this gift conversation? Any text messages, any emails, anything that shows she gave you $3,000 with no expectation of being paid back?" Karen shifted uncomfortably. "No, but we talked about it in person." Judge Judy nodded slowly, like she'd heard this excuse 1,000 times before. "Of course you did. And let me guess, there were no witnesses to this conversation either?" Karen shook her head. "Convenient," Judge Judy said dryly. "Very convenient. Now let's look at these text messages." She held up printed copies of the text exchanges between Karen and the plaintiff, and this is where it got really brutal. "I'm reading these messages and I see the plaintiff asking you repeatedly, 'When are you going to pay me back? You promised 6 months. It's been over a year. I need that money.' And your responses are very interesting. You say things like, 'I know, I'm sorry, I'll get it to you soon. Things are tight right now.' Not once, not in a single message, do you say, 'What are you talking about? That was a gift.' Not once do you correct her. You acknowledge the debt over and over again. The audience was eating this up. You could see people nodding, some of them actually saying, 'Mm-hmm' out loud." Karen tried to respond. "I was just being nice. I didn't want to make her feel bad by reminding her it was a gift." Judge Judy actually laughed at that. Not a friendly laugh. A laugh that said, "You must think I'm stupid. You were being nice? You were being nice by letting her believe you owed her $3,000 for over 2 years? That's not nice. That's called stringing someone along. That's called manipulation. You knew exactly what you were doing. You took her money, you spent her money, and you had no intention of ever paying it back. And when she finally got fed up and took you to court, you decided to lie about it and then, as a bonus, mock the judge who's deciding your case. Brilliant strategy." Karen was visibly shaking now. Her face was red, tears were streaming down her cheeks, but Judge Judy wasn't letting up. This is what people don't understand about Judge Judy. When she gets going, when she really decides someone needs to be taught a lesson, she doesn't stop until the job is complete. She's not cruel for the sake of being cruel. She's thorough. She wants to make sure that when people leave her courtroom, they understand exactly what they did wrong and why they lost. "Let me show you something else," Judge Judy said, pulling out another document. "These are Venmo requests from the plaintiff. 12 of them. 12 separate times she requested payment from you through the app. And you know what you did? You ignored every single one. If this was a gift, why didn't you respond to these requests and tell her she was mistaken? Why didn't you send her a message saying, 'Hey, remember, you gave me that money, you don't need to ask for it back'? I'll tell you why. Because it wasn't a gift and you knew it wasn't a gift. And you were hoping that if you ignored her long enough, she'd just give up." The plaintiff was nodding enthusiastically now, vindicated by every word Judge Judy spoke. She'd been gaslit by Karen for 2 years, been made to feel like she was the problem for asking for her own money back, and now Judge Judy was validating everything she'd been saying. Karen tried one last desperate attempt to save face. "I was going to pay her back eventually. I just needed more time." And that's when Judge Judy delivered the final blow. She leaned forward, looked Karen dead in the eyes, and said, "Eventually isn't a payment plan. Eventually is what liars say when they have no intention of following through. You're a liar, you're a thief, and you're someone who thinks they're above the rules. But here's what's going to happen. You're going to pay back every single penny of that $3,000. You're going to pay it within 30 days. And if you don't, this judgment will follow you, it will affect your credit, and it will remind you every single day that actions have consequences." The courtroom erupted, not in cheers because that's not allowed, but you could feel the energy shift. People were satisfied. Justice had been served. Karen looked completely defeated, broken down to nothing, and Judge Judy wasn't even finished yet. Judge Judy sat back in her chair, and for a moment she just looked at Karen with an expression that was somehow both disappointed and satisfied at the same time. The kind of look a parent gives a child who's finally learned a hard lesson. Then she did something that made the whole situation even more devastating. She turned to the plaintiff and her voice completely changed. It went from ice cold to warm, almost gentle. "I'm sorry you had to deal with this person," she said. "I'm sorry that someone you trusted, someone you considered a friend, took advantage of your kindness and then made you feel like you were the problem for wanting your money back. You did the right thing by bringing this to court, and I hope you choose your friends more carefully in the future." The plaintiff's eyes filled with tears, but these were good tears: relief, validation, 2 years of being gaslit, being called petty, being made to feel crazy for asking for what was rightfully hers, and now one of the most respected judges in America was telling her she was right all along. She nodded, unable to speak, but you could see the weight lifting off her shoulders. Judge Judy then turned back to Karen and the warmth disappeared instantly. "You're dismissed. Get out of my courtroom." Those words hit like a hammer. Short, simple, final. Karen stood there for a second like she couldn't believe it was over. Like she wanted to say something else, but the bailiff was already motioning for her to leave. She turned and started walking toward the exit. And this is the part that millions of people replayed over and over again when the clip went viral. As Karen walked past the gallery, past all those people who had just watched her get completely destroyed, she kept her head down. Her shoulders were hunched, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to make herself as small as possible. Someone in the audience actually said, "That's what you get," loud enough for everyone to hear. And a few people laughed. Not mean laughs, but the kind of laughter that comes from seeing someone who was arrogant and disrespectful finally face the consequences of their actions. The doors closed behind Karen, and the courtroom let out a collective exhale. The plaintiff was hugging her friend who came with her for support, and Judge Judy was already moving on to the next case like it was just another day at the office. But for everyone who witnessed it, this was anything but ordinary. Now let me tell you what happened after this episode aired, because the reaction was absolutely insane. The clip hit the internet, and within 24 hours it had over 10 million views. Within a week it was at 50 million. People were sharing it everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, you name it. The comment sections were flooded with people praising Judge Judy and absolutely roasting Karen. Comments like, "She really thought she could disrespect Judge Judy and get away with it," and "This is the most satisfying thing I've ever watched," and "Judge Judy is a national treasure." Some people were making memes, creating side-by-side comparisons of Karen's smug face at the beginning versus her devastated expression at the end. But here's what made it even bigger. News outlets picked it up. Entertainment websites wrote articles about it. Even legal commentators were discussing it, talking about how Judge Judy handled the disrespect while still maintaining her professional authority. Some lawyers were using the clip in their classes as an example of courtroom decorum, and what happens when you disrespect the judge. The episode became one of the most watched in Judge Judy's entire run, and that's saying something for a show that's been on the air for decades. People who had never even seen Judge Judy before were suddenly fans, binge-watching old episodes, looking for other moments where she put entitled people in their place. Karen, on the other hand, became internet infamous. People recognized her not by name, but as that woman who mocked Judge Judy's accent and got destroyed. And honestly, if you ask me, she got exactly what she deserved. But wait, because the implications of this moment go way deeper than just one case. If you're absolutely loving this story, and you want to see more entitled people getting the reality check they desperately need, do me a huge favor right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because I'm bringing you the most satisfying justice content on YouTube. And trust me, you don't want to miss a single upload. Seriously, subscribe right now, because what I'm about to tell you next shows you why this moment means so much more than just one case. Let's keep going. So let's talk about why this moment matters beyond just Karen getting what she deserved. This wasn't just about one case or one disrespectful defendant. This was about something much bigger. Judge Judy has spent her entire career being underestimated because of where she comes from, how she speaks, and the fact that she's a woman who doesn't apologize for being direct. And in that courtroom, in that moment, she represented every single person who's ever been mocked for their accent, their background, or their heritage. She represented every immigrant's kid who grew up hearing their parents being talked down to because of how they spoke. She represented every professional woman who's been dismissed or patronized in a male-dominated field. When she stood up to Karen, she wasn't just defending herself. She was defending all of us who've been made to feel less than because of something we can't control and shouldn't have to change. Think about how many people watched that clip and felt seen. How many people with accents, with ethnic backgrounds that get stereotyped, with working-class roots that get looked down upon, watched Judge Judy refuse to back down and felt empowered by it. That's the real power of that moment. Karen thought she was being clever, thought she was putting Judge Judy in her place. But what she actually did was give Judge Judy a platform to show the world that you don't have to change who you are to command respect. You don't have to soften your accent or hide your background or play small to be successful. Judge Judy became one of the most powerful people in television by being authentically herself. And this moment proved why that matters. And here's the thing about entitled people like Karen. They go through life thinking the rules don't apply to them. They mock, they disrespect, they take advantage of others, and they genuinely believe there won't be consequences because there usually aren't. Most people are too polite, too conflict-averse, too worried about being labeled as difficult to stand up to them. So these Karens of the world just keep doing what they do, getting away with it over and over again. But every once in a while they run into someone like Judge Judy. Someone who's not interested in being polite. Someone who's been battle-tested and has absolutely no patience for nonsense. And when that collision happens, it's beautiful. It's karma in real time. It's the universe correcting itself. This case became a cultural moment because people are tired. They're tired of watching entitled people get away with bad behavior. They're tired of seeing disrespect go unchecked. They're tired of people who think they're better than everyone else never facing consequences. So when Judge Judy delivered that takedown, when she systematically destroyed Karen's case and her credibility, it felt like justice not just for the plaintiff, but for everyone who's ever been on the receiving end of that kind of arrogance. The 50 million views weren't just about entertainment. They were about collective satisfaction. They were about people saying, yes, finally someone said what needed to be said. And you know what the best part is? Karen will never live this down. That clip is forever. Years from now, decades from now, people will still be watching it. Future generations will stumble across it and see her as a cautionary tale about what happens when you let your ego write checks your character can't cash. She walked into that courtroom thinking she was untouchable, and she left as a viral example of humiliation. Meanwhile, Judge Judy's legacy only got stronger. She reminded everyone why she's been the queen of daytime television for decades. She showed that real power doesn't come from putting others down. It comes from standing firm in who you are and refusing to tolerate disrespect. So what do you think? Did Karen get exactly what she deserved, or did Judge Judy take it too far? Personally, I think Judge Judy was absolutely justified, but I want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let me know if you think this was one of Judge Judy's greatest moments, or if she could have handled it differently. And listen, if you made it this far, you're exactly the kind of viewer I make these videos for. So do me a favor. Hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, and turn on all notifications so you never miss another video. I've got tons more stories about entitled people getting put in their place, courtroom justice, and the most satisfying takedowns you'll ever see. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for what's coming next. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Nobody in that courtroom expected what was about to happen, not the audience, not the cameras, and definitely not the woman who had just barged through the double doors with a confidence so loud it shook the air around her. They called her Karen, the kind of Karen who believed the world bent for her voice, and today she had chosen the worst possible opponent to challenge. But she didn't think so, not yet. She strutted forward, tossing her handbag onto the defendant's table and announcing to everyone within earshot, "Judge Judy can't handle me." And for a moment, the room believed her. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Because Judy wasn't what she used to be. That morning she looked tired, almost worn down. Her posture was heavy, her steps a little slower, her eyes quieter than usual. Even the audience whispered that something seemed off. Many thought Judy was past her prime. Some said her fire had dimmed. And Karen saw that, saw the slight slump, the soft exhale, the older woman adjusting her glasses, and she smiled like she'd already won. Karen underestimated her. And that mistake would ruin her. Judy didn't respond at first. She simply sat there, adjusting the files in front of her, absorbing Karen's insults with a silence that made the arrogance in the room grow stronger. Karen mistook that silence for weakness. The audience wondered if Judy had finally met someone too loud, too disrespectful, too wild to control. Even the bailiff leaned in, preparing for trouble. Judy seemed smaller today. Quieter. Almost fragile under Karen's storm. But what the room didn't know, not yet, was that Judy had already noticed something Karen desperately hoped no one would see. A detail buried so deep in the paperwork that Karen had assumed it was invisible. A detail that, if exposed, would shatter her entire defense in seconds. Judy knew. Judy had seen it the moment Karen dropped her file. But she let the woman talk. Let her show off. Let her believe she was unbeatable. Because Judy Bennett didn't need to shout to win. She didn't need to match Karen's volume. She just needed the right moment. And that moment was coming, fast. Karen kept bragging, her voice filling the courtroom like a storm cloud. "I'll show her who's in charge. I'm not scared of some old lady judge. This court works for me." Her words were sharp enough to make a few spectators lower their eyes. But Judy didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She didn't even lift her head. She simply flipped a page, tapped a single line on the document, and waited. Because in exactly 47 seconds, this woman, this loud, unshakable, unstoppable Karen, would be on her knees begging for mercy. And Judy would still be sitting there quietly, proving that an underdog's silence can be the loudest power in the room. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, do you think Judy already knows the truth, or is Karen in more trouble than she realizes? Comment, "Justice," if you're ready for what happens next. The courtroom settled into an uneasy silence after Karen's outburst, the kind of silence that carries weight, the kind that predicts trouble. Judy hadn't said a word yet. She didn't need to. She simply lifted her eyes, just barely, watching Karen with a calmness that felt almost unnatural. It was the sort of calm that belongs to someone who has already seen how this story ends. But Karen mistook that stillness for fear. She leaned back in her chair, smirking at the audience like she'd just won some unspoken battle. A few people avoided eye contact with her, others watched her like they were waiting for a storm to hit. And somewhere in the back, you could hear the soft tapping of a nervous shoe. Everyone could feel the tension, everyone except the woman causing it. Judy finally opened the file in front of her. Slowly. Deliberately. She flipped the first page with a fingertip, her expression unreadable. The room's energy shifted, not enough for Karen to notice, but just enough for the few who understood Judy's silence to exchange glances. The underdog energy was still there, but it was changing shape. "Ms. Carter," Judy said, her voice soft, almost gentle. Karen's head snapped forward, chin raised high. "That's Mrs. Carter," she corrected loudly, as if her marital status changed anything about the mess she was standing in. Judy didn't react. Not a blink. Not a sigh. Nothing. "Well, Mrs. Carter," she continued, "you're claiming your neighbor caused you emotional distress, physical inconvenience, and financial damages totaling $4,700. Is that correct?" Karen straightened with pride, like Judy had just read out her Olympic score. "Exactly. She ruined my peace of mind. My routine. My entire lifestyle." A few spectators shifted uncomfortably. Judy lifted her pen. "How?" Karen inhaled dramatically, preparing herself for her grand performance. "By constantly harassing me. She banged on the walls. She yelled at me. She made my dogs bark. She even made me late for my yoga class." The room didn't laugh, but it came dangerously close. Judy blinked slowly, as if trying to understand what she'd just heard. "You're saying your neighbor made your dogs bark?" "Yes," Karen said, with full confidence. "She provokes them." This time, 3 people in the audience lowered their heads to hide their smiles. Judy didn't smile. She didn't break. She flipped another page. "And what proof do you have?" Karen reached for her bag and pulled out a stack of printed screenshots. Grainy photos. Blurry timestamps. None of it made sense. She tossed them onto the desk like she was dealing playing cards, expecting applause. "Here. Everything," she said proudly. Judy lifted a single page with delicate fingers, squinting as if the paper itself was offensive to her eyesight. "Mrs. Carter," she said softly, "this is a picture of your neighbor, reading a book on her couch." "Yes," Karen snapped. "And that is when she was plotting to bother me." You can see it in her face. Someone in the audience snorted before quickly covering their mouth. Karen whipped her head around. Is something funny? She barked. Judy lightly tapped the paper. Mrs. Carter, is this your handwriting here in the corner? Oh yes, I like to annotate my evidence, Karen said proudly. And this note says, Judy paused, reading slowly, I can tell she hates me. Her energy is toxic. Yes, Karen said again, completely unaware of how ridiculous she sounded. Judy set the paper down and folded her hands. Mrs. Carter, do you understand what evidence is? The audience froze. Karen frowned, insulted. Of course. I'm not stupid. Judy leaned back slightly, not in arrogance, but in tired patience, the kind a worn-out teacher has with a stubborn student. Evidence proves something. It does not assume something. Are you saying I'm wrong? Karen demanded. No, Judy said calmly. I'm saying you've proven nothing. Karen's jaw tightened. Her pride cracked slightly. Well, the police were involved. Judy looked at another page. Yes. I see that. They were called, by your neighbor. That's because she was harassing me. Karen insisted. Judy lifted a brow. According to this report, she called because you were shouting at her from your balcony. Karen sputtered, searching for words. I was defending myself. From what? Judy asked softly. Karen hesitated. Too long. Long enough for the room to understand that she had no real answer. Judy closed the folder. Mrs. Carter, is it fair to say this dispute began when your neighbor asked you to stop parking in her assigned spot? Karen's face flushed a deep red. She was being dramatic. So you parked there? Repeatedly. She wasn't using it. Karen shouted. Because she works nights, Mrs. Carter, Judy replied, voice level. She comes home at 3 a.m. to find your SUV in her spot. That's not my problem, Karen snapped. Judy held her gaze, silent again. This was the moment Judy shifted from underdog to quiet, controlled power. No yelling. No threats. Just steady eyes and a mind sharper than Karen realized. And tell me, Judy continued, is this your signature on the complaint form? Karen waved the air dismissively. Yes. Obviously. It says here you included a sworn statement. Correct. And this sworn statement is dated 2 days before the incident you described. The courtroom froze. Karen blinked. What do you mean? I mean, Judy said, voice barely above a whisper, you filed this before the event supposedly happened. A slow gasp spread through the room. Karen swallowed. Well, I must have, maybe it was a mistake. Judy opened the folder again. The timestamp is digital. Automatic. You can't predate a sworn statement by accident. Karen's throat tightened. Judy leaned closer, not aggressive, just impossibly steady. Mrs. Carter, did you fabricate this claim before any incident took place? Karen's lips trembled. She looked around the room as if searching for an escape route. Judy didn't blink. The audience didn't breathe. And in that suffocating silence, Karen realized, the underdog judge she mocked, had just caught her in a lie that would collapse her entire case. The moment Judy finished her question, did you fabricate this claim before any incident took place? The air inside the courtroom turned thick, almost heavy enough to touch. It was the kind of moment that happens right before something breaks. People weren't just watching anymore, they were waiting. Every eye locked onto Karen, whose bravado had suddenly collapsed into silence. Karen's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed, her eyes darting between Judy, the bailiff, and the audience like a trapped animal seeking an exit. For a woman who walked in certain she owned the room, she now looked like she didn't belong anywhere in it. Judy didn't move. She didn't blink. She didn't give Karen a lifeline. Instead, she calmly said, "Take your time, Mrs. Carter. But remember, you're under oath." Those words were soft, gentle, almost polite. But they hit harder than any yell could. That was Judy's power, quiet pressure. The kind Karen was never built to withstand. Karen tried to recover. She inhaled sharply, forcing a laugh that cracked at the edges. What kind of question is that? Of course I didn't fabricate anything. This is ridiculous. But her voice shook. The audience noticed. Judy noticed. And worst of all, Karen noticed that they noticed. And that's when it began. The 47 seconds that would destroy her. Judy lifted the sworn statement again, her fingertip landing on the timestamp. "This says you filed it 2 days early. Do you dispute this?" Karen clenched her jaw. "Maybe the system messed up. That's not my fault." Judy tilted her head slightly, like a teacher questioning a student who just blamed the dog for eating their homework. "You're suggesting the court's timestamping software malfunctioned, but only on your form." "It happens." Karen insisted, louder than necessary, desperation leaking through her tone. "Does it?" Judy asked quietly. Karen opened her mouth, then froze again. Panic flickered behind her eyes. Judy continued, calmly dismantling her defenses. "You also submitted these photos." She lifted the blurry screenshots. "They're dated a week before the alleged harassment." Well, maybe the harassment started early." Karen stuttered. "Then why didn't you mention that in your sworn statement?" Judy asked. Karen inhaled sharply. "Because, this is all confusing." Judy flipped one more page. Her voice remained level, almost soothing. "Mrs. Carter, every date on every document you provided contradicts the story you told under oath. That is not confusion. That is fabrication." Karen's face went completely still. Then red. Then pale. Her hands shook on the desk. The audience leaned back like they were watching someone step onto a landmine. Karen tried one more attempt at control. "No, you're twisting everything. You're making me look like the bad guy." Judy exhaled softly, as if deeply tired. "Mrs. Carter. I don't have to make you look like anything. Your own documents are doing that for you." That sentence shattered whatever remained of Karen's confidence. Her breathing quickened. Her shoulders lifted and dropped unevenly. Sweat formed at her hairline. Her voice came out thinner now, wired with panic. I didn't mean to, it wasn't like, this is unfair." "Unfair?" Judy repeated, her tone still calm but with a thread of steel weaving through it. "Mrs. Carter, you brought this case. You asked the court to examine your claims. I am examining them." Karen pressed both hands to the table as if grounding herself. "You're twisting everything. I came here for justice, not to be interrogated." "This is justice," Judy replied. The underdog judge who'd walked in quiet, weary, maybe even underestimated, now held the entire room in the palm of her hand. And Karen realized it. The words she said next came out in a shaky half-whisper. I don't like the way you're talking to me." Judy didn't even lift her voice. "I'm speaking to you the same way I speak to everyone who takes that witness chair. If you feel uncomfortable, perhaps it's because the truth is uncomfortable." A murmur swept through the spectators. Karen's eyes widened, breathing shallow. You're attacking me." "No," Judy said. "I'm asking for honesty. And so far, I haven't received any." And then Judy delivered the line that detonated the courtroom. "Mrs. Carter, did you file this case because your neighbor reported you first?" Silence. Complete, unforgiving silence. Karen's mouth fell open. That was the truth she desperately hoped would remain hidden. The truth Judy had been waiting to reveal. The truth that connected every contradiction in her story. For the first time, Karen had no words at all. Her lips quivered. Her eyes glistened. The room watched her fall apart, the consequences finally catching up to her. That's when the meltdown truly ignited. Karen slammed her hand on the desk, voice cracking, "You can't even handle me." Judy didn't move. She simply folded her hands, looked directly into Karen's unraveling eyes, and whispered, "Oh, I'm handling you just fine." The countdown had begun. And Karen didn't stand a chance. Karen's meltdown hung in the air like smoke, thick, choking, impossible to ignore. Her voice was still echoing off the courtroom walls, "You can't even handle me." It was the loudest sound anyone had made since this case began, but somehow, the quiet that followed was even louder. Judge Judy didn't flinch. She didn't recoil. She didn't offer a warning, or a threat, or even a raised eyebrow. She simply looked at Karen the way a surgeon looks at an X-ray, patient, calm, and absolutely certain of what needs to be done. That look alone began to drain the remaining color from Karen's face. "Mrs. Carter," Judy said softly, "sit down." Karen didn't. Couldn't. Her body froze in awkward defiance, hands clenching the edge of the podium like she was afraid of falling. The audience watched with wide eyes, unable to blink. This wasn't a courtroom anymore. It was an unraveling. Judy didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Sit," she repeated. This time, something in her tone, the quiet authority, the weight of experience, the exhaustion of a woman who had seen this type of lie 1,000 times before, forced Karen's knees to bend. She sank slowly, shakily, like her body was giving up before her mouth would. Judy opened the file again. The simple sound of paper shifting felt like thunder. "You filed this case 2 days before the incident," she said, tapping one page. "You submitted photos dated a week before it," she said, tapping another. "And you provided a sworn statement that contradicts every one of your claims." Karen's breath hitched. It wasn't, "This is all being blown out of." Judy cut her off, voice calm as ice. "Mrs. Carter, this isn't confusion. This is choreography." A stunned gasp rippled across the room. Karen blinked quickly, panic fogging her eyes. "Choreography? What does that even mean?" Judy lifted her gaze, finally meeting Karen's eyes directly for the first time since the meltdown began. "It means every lie you told was rehearsed. Practiced. Prepared. You didn't come here for justice. You came here to punish someone who stood up to you." Karen's mouth fell open. No, that's not. "Your neighbor reported you first," Judy continued, "and this, all of this, is retaliation." Karen shook her head violently, but the denial didn't reach her voice. "That's not true. She was harassing me." Judy didn't argue. She didn't defend. She didn't even respond immediately. She simply let the weight of the truth settle around Karen like a cage. Then Judy spoke the line, the one that broke the room, the one that ended the fight, the one that made Karen shrink into the smallest version of herself anyone had ever seen. "Mrs. Carter. I can handle you. What you can't handle are the consequences." The courtroom didn't gasp this time. It froze. Because everyone knew, that sentence wasn't just a correction. It wasn't just a comeback. It was a verdict. Karen's face crumpled. Her breath turned shallow. Her hands shook uncontrollably against the desk. The power she had walked in with, the arrogance, the confidence, the swagger, drained from her body like someone had unplugged her from her own ego. She whispered, "Consequences," like she'd never heard the word before. Judy nodded once. Yes. The consequences of lying under oath. The consequences of falsifying evidence. The consequences of using the court as a weapon instead of a shield. Karen's throat tightened. Tears began forming despite her attempts to blink them back. I didn't think. No, Judy interrupted gently, you didn't. Because if you had, you would have realized something important. The room leaned in. Even the bailiff looked up. Judy continued, voice still quiet, still soft, but now sharp enough to pierce steel. You thought I was old. You thought I was tired. You thought I was an easy win. But what you didn't think about, she tapped the folder, was the truth. And the truth doesn't age. The truth doesn't tire. The truth doesn't care what name you call me. Karen's lips quivered. Judge, please, I didn't mean. You meant every word, Judy said calmly. And every word contradicted the evidence. You underestimated me. You underestimated the court. But most of all, she leaned forward. You underestimated the consequences. Karen's shoulders sagged. Her head dropped. She whispered, barely audible, I'm sorry. It wasn't remorse, yet. It was fear. The kind of fear that comes when someone finally realizes they've run out of lies to hide behind. Judy closed the file gently, the soft click echoing like a door shutting. This case isn't about your neighbor anymore, she said. It's about accountability. And you are about to learn what that word truly means. Karen inhaled sharply, a trembling gasp that sounded almost like a sob. The audience watched with wide, unblinking eyes. The underdog judge had just flipped the entire courtroom upside down. Quietly. Effortlessly. Unforgettably. And Karen wasn't just losing the case. She was losing the last piece of control she ever thought she had. The moment Judy closed the file, something inside Karen collapsed. You could almost see it, the way her shoulders caved inward, the way her breath came in short, uneven bursts, the way her jaw trembled despite her attempts to hold it steady. Just minutes earlier, she had walked in believing she owned the room. Now, she looked like she barely recognized where she was. Judy didn't press. She didn't push. She simply waited. And that silence, the same silence that Karen once mistook for weakness, became the very thing that crushed her. Karen swallowed hard. Judge, please, she whispered, her voice already cracking. I didn't want it to become like this. Judy raised an eyebrow. You didn't want it to become the truth? Karen shook her head quickly, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. No, I mean, I didn't think it would go this far. I was upset. My neighbor, she annoyed me. I just reacted. Judy's voice stayed level, soft but unshakable. Reacting is slamming a door. Reacting is raising your voice. Filing a false sworn statement is not reacting, Mrs. Carter. It is planning. Karen's face tightened with pain, as if Judy's words were physical blows. I'm sorry, she said, too fast, too desperate, the kind of sorry that comes not from remorse, but from fear of what's coming next. Judy didn't accept it. Not outright. You're sorry because you were caught, she said, still calm. But you're not sorry for what you did to your neighbor. Karen wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing mascara across her cheek. I didn't mean to hurt her. I didn't think she'd fight back. I didn't think anyone would believe her over me. And that, right there, was the truth she never meant to say out loud. Judy leaned in slightly. Why? Karen froze. Why, what? Why didn't you think anyone would believe her over you? Karen hesitated, too long. Her voice shrank down to almost nothing. Because I thought, people usually take my side. The audience tensed. Judy didn't move. Mrs. Carter, Judy said quietly, privilege is not a legal defense. And arrogance is not a shield. Karen's tears finally fell. Please. Judge. I'm begging you. Don't ruin my life. I'll take it back. I'll pay whatever she wants. Just, don't make this worse. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Judy breathed in slowly, her expression not angry, just disappointed. Begging for mercy is easy when the truth catches up to you. But actions have consequences. And these consequences are yours. Karen bowed her head, shoulders shaking, her earlier confidence completely destroyed. She wasn't shouting now. She wasn't mocking anyone. She wasn't calling Judy old, weak, or incapable. She was finally facing the truth she spent the entire case trying to bury. She had come here to win through intimidation. But now, she couldn't even intimidate herself. When Karen finally fell silent, truly silent, the room felt different. The tension wasn't explosive anymore. It wasn't angry or chaotic. It was heavy. The kind of heaviness that follows truth when it finally has the courage to stand in the center of a room. Karen sat hunched over, hands clasped tight, mascara streaking down her cheeks. She looked smaller than she had at any point in the case. Smaller than when she mocked the bailiff. Smaller than when she shouted at the audience. Smaller than when she stormed in claiming Judge Judy couldn't handle her. Now, it was clear to everyone, Judy had been handling her without ever raising her voice. Judy waited until Karen lifted her eyes, hesitant, fearful, fragile. Mrs. Carter, Judy began, her tone softer than anyone expected, I don't take pleasure in seeing someone fall apart. But I also don't ignore wrongdoing because someone is uncomfortable facing it. Karen's lips trembled. I know. I know I messed up. I know I shouldn't have done all this. But, please, don't make this worse for me. I'm asking you. As a human being. Judy tapped her pen lightly against the file, the sound echoing like a heartbeat in the quiet courtroom. As a human being, Judy repeated, I understand regret. I understand fear. And I understand how easy it is to make decisions out of anger. But what I do not understand, and what I will never excuse, is using the legal system to punish someone who simply stood up to you. Karen's eyes dropped again as if the very act of meeting Judy's gaze was too much. Judy continued, voice steady but compassionate. Your neighbor didn't harass you. She didn't provoke you. She didn't torment you. She exercised her right to boundaries. She asked you to stop parking in her spot. And you responded by trying to ruin her life on paper. A ripple of discomfort moved through the spectators. They all knew someone like Karen, someone who believed consequences were optional and accountability was negotiable. Judy leaned forward slightly. You came into this courtroom believing I was weak. Believing I was old. Believing I had lost my edge. And because of that assumption, you thought you could manipulate this court without facing repercussions. Karen whispered weakly, I didn't mean it like that. You meant it exactly like that, Judy said, still calm. But I've learned something in all my years on this bench. The people who shout the loudest often hide the biggest lies. And the people underestimated the most, are often the ones who see the truth the clearest. For the first time since the case began, the courtroom shifted, not toward Karen, not toward drama, but toward Judy. The underdog had risen, not with volume, not with aggression, but with pure, quiet command. Judy flipped the file shut. The sound sealed Karen's fate. Here is my ruling, she said. Karen stiffened, bracing herself as though gravity had doubled. Your claim is dismissed with prejudice, Judy began, which means you may not refile it. Karen's jaw slackened. Additionally, Judy continued, you are ordered to pay your neighbor's legal fees. Karen's breath hitched sharply. Judge, please. Judy held up a hand. I'm not finished. The room went still. For knowingly falsifying a sworn statement and submitting fabricated evidence, I am imposing a penalty of $1,000. Karen's face drained of color. She covered her mouth, her voice trembling. I don't have that kind of money right now. Judy didn't look away. Perhaps you should have considered the cost before manufacturing a case to satisfy your ego. The words hit with the precision of a scalpel. Clean. Sharp. Final. Judy softened her tone, not out of sympathy, but out of clarity. Mrs. Carter, consequences do not care whether you are ready for them. They arrive when the truth demands them. Karen shook her head slowly, tears falling again. Please. Please, Judge. I swear, I won't do it again. I'll fix things with my neighbor. I'll apologize. I'll do anything. Judy studied her, really studied her. Not the loud woman who stormed in, not the arrogant woman who insulted a judge, not the entitled woman who thought she'd win through intimidation. But the scared woman sitting in front of her now, stripped of everything except the truth she had tried so desperately to avoid. Mrs. Carter, Judy said finally, the purpose of punishment is not to ruin your life. It's to teach you how to live it with integrity. Karen nodded frantically, desperate for any scrap of compassion. And perhaps, Judy added softly, you'll remember after today that strength isn't measured by how loudly you yell, but by how honestly you stand. Karen broke into silent sobs, her shoulders shaking. Judy looked at the bailiff. Judgment is entered. Next case. And with that, she stood, not triumphantly, not victoriously, but with the quiet dignity of a woman who had been underestimated and still risen above every expectation. The entire courtroom followed her with their eyes. The underdog had won. And everyone knew it. As Judge Judy stepped off the bench, the courtroom remained absolutely still. It wasn't the usual end-of-case chatter. No papers rustling. No chairs scraping. No whispered reactions. It was a silence that came from witnessing something rare, not a victory, but a transformation. Not just of Karen, but of how everyone in that room saw Judy now. Because for the first half of the case, Judy looked like the underdog. Quiet. Tired. Slow. A judge some assumed had finally met someone she couldn't control. But by the end, Judy proved something far more powerful: authority doesn't need volume. Truth doesn't need force. And justice doesn't need to shout to be heard. Karen remained seated for a long moment after Judy left. She looked around the courtroom as if waking up from a long, furious dream she couldn't fully remember. Her breathing was uneven, her face streaked with tears and mascara. She was no longer the woman who marched in, declaring dominance, laughing arrogantly, mocking the judge in front of a full room. She was just, human. Flawed. Afraid. Exposed. Her neighbor, sitting a few rows back, didn't celebrate. She didn't smirk. She didn't gloat. She simply watched Karen with a mixture of relief and sadness, because she knew what it felt like to be humiliated in public. Only now, justice had leveled the ground between them. Karen wiped her face with trembling fingers. For the first time all day, she looked over at the woman she accused. Their eyes met, just for a moment. Karen's lips quivered as if trying to form an apology. Her neighbor gave a small nod. Forgiveness wasn't instantly granted. But understanding, that was a start. And that is something a courtroom rarely captures on camera. Karen stood slowly, gripping the desk for balance. She took a deep breath, the kind that comes after a lifetime of holding things in. Her voice was barely audible as she whispered to her neighbor, "I'm sorry." It wasn't theatrical. It wasn't dramatic. It was real. The neighbor swallowed, nodded once more, and whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't approval. It wasn't comfort. It was acknowledgement. Karen walked toward the exit like a different person. Each step softer, each breath shakier, each moment revealing a woman facing herself for the first time. Outside the courtroom doors, reporters lurked, cameras ready, microphones lifted. They wanted the headline, the meltdown, the humiliation, the Fat Karen story. But when Karen stepped out with tear-streaked cheeks and shaking hands, something unexpected happened. She didn't hide. She didn't deny. She didn't lash out. She simply said, "I deserved the judge's ruling. I learned something today." And the cameras, for once, didn't twist it. Inside, the bailiff was preparing the bench for the next case when he glanced toward the hallway, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Not because he enjoyed seeing Karen fall, but because he had seen what most people missed. Judy wasn't a tired judge losing her touch. She wasn't overwhelmed or outmatched. She wasn't past her era. She was still the same force she had always been, sharper, calmer, wiser. She simply chose when to strike. And that timing was what made her unforgettable. Back in her chambers, Judy hung her robe gently, placing it over the wooden hook with quiet care. She moved slowly, not because she was weak, but because she understood the weight of what she carried. Decades of cases. Thousands of lies. Millions of eyes watching her every move. Yet she remained consistent, justice first, ego never. She poured herself a small cup of tea and sat by the window, letting the afternoon light warm her face. She thought briefly of Karen, not with resentment or disappointment, but with a distant hope that maybe, just maybe, today's consequences would open a door to self-reflection. She thought of the neighbor, too. The quiet strength it took to show up, to speak, to defend truth even against someone louder, richer, and crueler. But most of all, she thought of something simple. How quickly people mistake quietness for weakness. And how wrong they usually are. By the time the next case was brought in, Judy was ready, calm, steady, collected. The courtroom door opened, the audience murmured, and her next chapter began like every one before it, with truth as her compass. The story of Karen would spread online, clips going viral, reactions pouring in, commentators dissecting every second. Some would focus on the meltdown. Some on the humiliation. Some on the iconic one-liner that broke the internet. But the people who truly understood the moment, knew the story wasn't about a loud woman being shut down. It was about a quiet woman rising up. It was about strength, silent, patient, unstoppable strength. And it was about the simple truth Judy reminded everyone of that day. You don't have to shout to win. You just have to be right. And if you're someone who believes that justice doesn't always roar, it sometimes whispers, then make sure you hit like, subscribe, and comment "Justice served" below. Because stories like this, they deserve to be heard until the very last second.